Welcome to BWI Live. I'm Thomas Frank Carr, live from Florida. Greg Pickel checking in. It's been a whirlwind travel day, plus reporting, and now James Franklin's press conference, which ended a little over an hour ago. We're going to get into all the things that have happened with Penn State football. Big game coming up tomorrow, the biggest game of the season, the biggest game in the last 11 years of James Franklin's career, the chance to play for a national championship appearance. Greg, how are you doing? What's going on with you, buddy? How's everything going?
I'm good, T. Frank. Hope everybody back at home, or if they're traveling to Miami here or Fort Lauderdale, has a good flight today. We got here about 6 o'clock last night after the availabilities yesterday, and then the head coaches won this morning. But we walk in, get settled in the hotel room, T. Frank, turn on the news, and they're telling us that it's the coldest day in Florida in 2 years. So I thought that was kind of funny, considering what we left in Harrisburg and State College. So all good. Yeah, I see the comment about the late start. We backed things up because James Franklin and Marcus Freeman just finished their joint head coaches news conference over at the Media Hotel, a short drive from where we are, right around 10 a.m. So unfortunately, we could not start right at 10. We would love to. But anyway, you can go check that video out here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. They were good, T. Frank. It lasted about 40 minutes, and James Franklin and Marcus Freeman got into a number of topics and a lot of big picture stuff. That's kind of been the theme of these college football playoff news conferences, especially the joint head coaches ones the day before the game. A lot of big picture stuff, but both were asking about injuries to key players, and we'll get into that. And certainly I think everyone is gearing up for game day here in Florida.
So is it like a lot of national people asking big picture questions? Is it like because that was part of the conversation in the Fiesta Bowl as well, was a lot of more attention from people that aren't us, that want the details of what's going on, when, who, what, when, where, why, and more of like what you're describing. Is there a lot more national media attention, or was it all just the regulars and everyone's getting lunch together in the hotel media lounge afterwards?
Yeah, no, there's a lot of national media here, as you can imagine. They're either at this game or they're in Dallas for the Cotton Bowl. And whoever, if they had multiple people at the same outlet who had to draw straws, and somebody had to go to the icy winter wonderland that is Dallas, and somebody had to come here for the second coldest day, or the most coldest day in 2 years when it was 65, I think they worked out in their favor. But yeah, no, a lot of stuff you've heard James Franklin talk about before if you've been watching here on the YouTube channel or following our coverage at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. His belief in that everyone should play the same number of conference games, that everyone should be in a conference, that everyone should either be able to play in a conference championship or that no one should be able to play them at all, that there should be a college football commissioner, all of those familiar talking points. He hates that the way college football is going could end the walk-on story as we know it, and he has concerns about the 105-man roster limit. So all the hits were played at this particular news conference. But again, they did get into some game stuff as well.
Did it get awkward with Marcus Freeman sitting right there talking about having to play in a conference and conference championship games? Like, I joke, but like that is something where he said that before. And then Notre Dame fans have taken that as an insult, and now he's saying it directly to them. So it's one of those things where you can say it elsewhere, but to say it right there, I mean, I guess he's a man of principles. He says what he believes in. So I'm curious, like, the reaction overall to that.
Yeah, the highlight was when James Franklin was talking about the opportunity to represent our conferences, and then he said, well, our conference, and kind of looked at Freeman and gave him a wink and a smile, and Freeman laughed. But, so, no, it didn't get awkward. And, Marcus Freeman, I got the impression, would have rather have done anything else but that media session this morning. I don't know if every news conference he has is like that, but he certainly did not seem thrilled to be spending part of his 24 hours to game time dealing with the media. And I'm not necessarily sure that I blame him in that regard, T. Frank. So, but no, it wasn't awkward. And Marcus Freeman, to his credit, he was asked about the idea of them not being in a conference and them being independent. And he said, look, if they came to us tomorrow and said, you can no longer be independent, you must join a conference, he said we would just be like, okay, well, how do we adjust in this new world that we live in to basically take the punches, roll with them, and make the best plan possible? So I thought his answer was good. You can, again, see it over on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube page when we wrap up here. But, yeah, I thought he was really good, and I thought that, it could have been a strange setting or a strange, cadence, I guess, for that news conference, considering all the topics and the differences between these two schools. But, no, it was perfectly fine.
Bane Train, my guy here in the chat, he says, it's not an insult, but we need people to buy into the same rules governing the whole thing. You would be surprised what college football fans can find insulting. And for Notre Dame, their fierce independence has been a point of pride for generations upon generations. So when you say, like, you've got to join a conference, it's basically like, live free or die and all that other nonsense. So I know we're kidding around, obviously, but also, like, there's a little bit of truth to it, and I'm sure that it's the way we're talking about it is very different than the way they're going to be talking about it on our sister channel over on the Notre Dame site on Blue and Gold Illustrated. So let's get into the actual football stuff. Let's talk about Abdul Carter injury update news. I'm sure it's going to be as exciting as the graphic I just put up here on the YouTube channel for everybody. Greg, what did James Franklin have to say about his star defender and his availability for tomorrow?
Yeah, so as you can imagine, James Franklin not interested in revealing anything more than he felt like he had to or wanted to at this news conference 24 hours before kickoff. And look, as we'll talk about in a minute, he was not the only head coach on this particular day that had to field a question about the health of a star player, because Notre Dame's Jeremiah Love is in a similar situation. We'll talk about what Marcus Freeman said about him momentarily. But the direct quote from James Franklin was, "We anticipate Abdul playing. He's doing everything he possibly can to play. His approach has been awesome. He's lived in the training room, but it'll be a game time decision. We'll see." And then he goes on to say that he's approached it the right way, that they're hopeful and expecting Abdul to play, but we'll see how it plays out. And so take it for what it's worth. It's a true game time decision. I think we all could have assumed that prior to this news conference, even prior to last Saturday's news conference, that they're going to do as much work as they could with him, both in State College and also here in Florida, with the trainers and the doctors and things like that, and then get to Hard Rock Stadium tomorrow, put him through some early testing, and see if it's possible at all. So I think, again, I think that the genuine part of all this is that if he can play T. Frank, he will. And whatever he can give Penn State, he will give Penn State. The question is just going to be, what can he give them? And without knowing the specifics of the injury and all of that, it's just impossible for us to sit here and speculate. I think he's going to try to play. Will he? I think we'll have a better feeling for that during pregame warmups. But one thing I'll note, and it's important if you missed it over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, is that
can I just jump in here quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, his participation, I think, I don't want to say is guaranteed, but I feel strongly he can play. But as you pointed out, and as James Franklin talked about on Saturday, how able is he to play? What is he able to do? He can run, so he can still be on the football field. But what kind of contact can he take? And I'll get more into this into the game preview. But I think that dictates his impact on the game is, where they play him and how how the injury dictates the nature of his contact on the field. That, to me, that's the whole question about this. But I said, what's over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com for people to know?
Yeah, so Penn State, as we all know, had to release a availability report 2 hours before its Big Ten games in the regular season. It actually released one before the SMU game as well, and SMU was not required to do the same by the ACC. So I don't know what mechanism transpired to allow Penn State to learn that it did not need to release one before it played Boise State, who also is not required to release one by the Mountain West Conference, but they did not do so before that game. The Big Ten was okay with it since it's not a college football playoff requirement. So Penn State, before this contest, will have the choice of whether it wants to release a pregame availability report. I think we all know the answer to that question, T. Frank. They will not be doing so. And so you're not going to get any kind of insight in terms of questionable. Now, look, I think we all could probably assume that with or without that piece of paper, Abdul Carter would be listed as questionable. And I just don't have any doubt in my mind that that's where he would be listed. So not the end of the world. But I did want to point that out in case you didn't see our story on that. The Penn State does have the choice to release that or not release that. And based on what they did before Boise State, and based on how James Franklin has long dealt with handling injuries, they will not be releasing one.
Do you know how absurd it is? The sentence that came out of your mouth, and to no fault of your own, that it is ridiculous, but the NCAA and the Big Ten don't control the playoff of their own sport. Like, that just, like, when you phrased it that way, of like, doesn't, like, ESPN controls the college football playoff. It's its own entity. It is not the NCAA. I'm not crazy about that, right? That's correct.
No, you're right. The college football playoff does run is an organization, a governing body that runs the college football playoff.
Can
So yeah, I
can
was just
you
surprised,
imagine?
honestly. Yeah.
Can you imagine if the NBA didn't own its own playoff? I mean, we talk about the
It's the
absurdity of the
wonderful wide
transfer
world of
portal.
college athletics. Yes.
Yeah, we talk about the transfer portal not making sense, the schedule not making sense. This is ridiculous. And I had to point that out. Sometimes we just get so like, it's okay, like this thing happens, so now this is the new thing. But it's crazy. Couple things here in the chat. We do have to get to some of these because once again, we have people that are showing us up, Greg, with kindness. Felix donates $100 to the channel.
Yes.
Felix C says, outstanding content and coverage for the entire team. You represent Penn State well. Keep it up. And PSU to the Natty. Thank you so much, Felix. Thank you for the kindness. Always appreciate people saying nice things. And also appreciate you and your support of us here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. Stephen Light says the same thing. He said, if I had a dime for every national reporter that took the easy cliche over analysis, I'd be rich. It is so, I don't want to get too much into the weeds, and I think that there is a fair criticism there. But when you appeal to a larger audience, you don't need to go as deep. And so, it is their job to talk about the important high-level things. It's our job to give you what we give you here on the YouTube channel. And hopefully that's why you guys are still here, and that's what you're saying there. Appreciate that. So, Notre Dame also has injuries. Jeremiah Love, but also I think they had some defensive line injuries coming out of the last game. So that is something that I know Penn State fans that BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, we've got the hardcore fans that are turning over every stone like their coaches. What was the information from Marcus Freeman on his team's injury situation?
Yeah, so Jeremiah Love, the star running back for Notre Dame, has practiced this week, did so with a brace on his right knee prior to coming down here to Florida with the team. So I don't know if he's going to wear that during the game. Notre Dame has not announced that yet. I would have a hard time believing he's 100%, but they said he's good to go. He's going to play. No one's 100%, Marcus Freeman accurately noted at this time of the year, but he is going to play. He is going to.
Is it just me, or did the internet in the hotel get Greg, everybody? All right. So I don't know if Greg is still talking. All right. We did lose Greg. So I'm going to tell Greg that, and then we're going to talk about something else right now. Greg, are you back?
I am. Yes, we lost internet there briefly for a second. Yeah, I think it was Marcus Freeman not wanting any of the world's injury information about his team to get out there in the internet and the YouTube world. But yeah, I'm not sure where it cut me off. But long story short, Jeremiah Love is going to suit up tomorrow night. How much he can play, we'll just have to wait and see. But if he comes out in that right brace for warm-ups, I would be willing to bet his usage is going to be less than what Notre Dame would like. And if he doesn't, it could be in the ballpark of about the same.
Gotcha. So let's give Greg's internet a break, and let's talk about something very near and dear to my heart, and that is really nice things for your house. Today's show is powered by Rothrock Wood Project. Penn State's about to go and compete for the right to be in a national championship game. They are on the verge of maybe your lifelong dreams, and maybe you want to celebrate that with something awesome. How about a Penn State fan cave? How about some Penn State centric things in your house that are more of a memento of your passion and your love for this sport? Rothrock Wood Project, they make custom furniture, including what you can see here, Penn State fan caves, bar tops. They can do shelves, built-ins, things like that in terms of building you, surfaces with Penn State football colors and custom woodworking. They use Live Edge in a lot of their work, but what they are is they're a woodworking project here in State College that uses trees from local areas here in State College, reclaimed wood, to then turn them into Penn State heirlooms for you. The trees, by the way, and the projects, they have the original GPS coordinates of where the tree sat, and they're all from Center County. So you get to own a piece of Happy Valley and put it in your house. And if you saw here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel, they've done some really awesome things. I was talking to Scott. They've done at least two, I know he said 2 fan caves and a couple of other situations where they've done some other things. And if maybe you don't want to go all in on the Penn State stuff and you just want some really classy furniture, they do an amazing job. Epoxy to coordinate the colors with your house, to give you that classy look you want. They use really high quality wood as well in terms of making these tables and making them into unique, one-of-a-kind things you can buy. They also have a deal, by the way, with State College. So they're going to be with the borough. So they're going to be able to procure trees from downtown, from municipal projects. So they're going to have different parts and different aspects of Happy Valley that you can turn into something for your house. So you can go check them out, Rothrock Wood Project on Instagram or Facebook. You can check out rothrockwoodproject.com as well. Okay, it is the new year. And a cliche is that, you want your New Year's resolutions, Greg. What if your New Year's resolution is to, I don't know, take control of your life for the first time ever? And you do that by making more money and determining your life by being your own boss. It is the American dream, by the way, to manifest your own destiny. If you're your own boss, you can set your own rules. You can do all the things necessary to live the life you want. And Andy at My Perfect Franchise, that's what he does. He helps people do that by securing them their future within a franchise. You buy into an already existing corporate structure, but you own the business that you're running. He can get you in the right business with the skills that you have and with the knowledge that you have to be successful. This is not just like drag and drop, copy, paste. You go through an intense process so that he understands your financial situation. If this is a good idea for you, you're not betting your entire livelihood on something that may not work. He's a guy that's owned multiple franchises. He's had to sell some of them because they didn't work out. So you are in good hands to find the right situation. And if you are middle management and corporate, you have those skills, contact Andy. Andy at myperfectfranchise.net, 404-973-9901. Join the growing community of people from the Blue White Illustrated message board and from the Penn State fandom in general who have taken the plunge with Andy and now own their own businesses. Appreciate them. Quick programming note. Normally, Andy is on our recruiting show. We may not have a recruiting show specifically this week because if Penn State wins, we're going to be doing a recap show on Saturday. If they don't win, we'll be back next week. So it's a TBD on what happens after the game. So just stay tuned. It'll be Saturday, probably around the same time we'll go live, just to keep that consistent of 10 a.m. But that's what's coming up in the future. Also, Greg, a great thing is we can go to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com and you can talk to us at any point. So tell them about how they join us at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com if you're there.
Yeah, you want to head over to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com where it's $1 for 7 days of access. That gets you through the Orange Bowl tomorrow. That would get you through. I know nobody wants to think about this, but you have to, especially if you're ready to sign up for Blue White Illustrated. The 5-day transfer portal window that would open if Penn State loses tomorrow night. Or if the Nittany Lions do win, it'll get you through to next week and one step closer to the College Football Playoff Championship National title game. So check us out today, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. It's BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. 7 days for $1 for 7 days of access. T. Frank, I'll let you answer that question.
Yep.
You assume that's a yay?
Yep, 4:30. So 7:30 kick time, 3 hours before kickoff. We'll be having our tailgate show. I was going to get to that later, but yeah, we're going to have our same tailgate show, same process, same post-game show immediately after the game. We'll talk about everything that happens with what happened, in the game, how all that breaks down. Lan and I have been watching the film. You should check out his YouTube channel. Some great stuff from him this week. We'll be getting into that tomorrow, 4:30 on the tailgate show.
Awesome. All right. Stephen Light, I know you're on the board, and so you're tasked with reminding me to turn the AC back on because I turned it off for you. So please don't let me forget to turn it back on when the show ends. But hopefully it makes the audio a little bit better for you all watching the show here. And thanks for being with us on this edition of BWI Live. Penn State, Notre Dame, T. Frank. The game is, as we talk about this, at 11:20 Eastern time on Wednesday, about 30 hours away or so. Kickoff set for 7:30 p.m. Eastern time on ESPN on Thursday, January 9th. The spread briefly moved yesterday. Penn State bumped to a 2.5-point underdog. It moved back down to 1.5 points this morning. Whether or not it stays there, time will tell. Certainly, I would expect some pregame movement potentially once we get a better read over at the stadium on the Abdul Carter and Jeremiah Love situation. Some other guys banged up for Notre Dame too. So, let's dive into our game preview here. It's going to start with we're going to start with the Penn State offense against the Notre Dame defense, or where would you like to kick things off? Yeah,
sure. Let's start with the Penn State offense for sure. I went into. First off, I want to say all this starts by watching film. But then when you get a beat of like what's going on the field, then I like to go in and find, okay, so what are the season-long trends here? What are the things that happen? And this, speaking of BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, you should go read the article I wrote yesterday, because I had a literal epiphany about the Penn State offense and the things that have really defined the season for the way teams attack Penn State. And coverage has nothing to do, not nothing to do. Coverage has much less to do with this team when it comes to the quarterback and the passing game than it has to do with Penn State's running game, what Andy Kotelnicki is able to do against a defense like Notre Dame. So for me, I went, Greg, from turning on the film on last week at some point, let's say it was Saturday, and thinking, oh boy, this is a tough matchup for Penn State. There's a lot of things here that are Penn State's kryptonite. To now, 24 hours before the game, roughly, you said 30 hours before the game, I almost feel like this is a huge advantage for Penn State. This matchup specifically of scheme on scheme is something that Andy Kotelnicki has taken advantage of all season long, to the point that teams don't play man coverage against Penn State all that much anymore, especially on first and second down, because of what the run game is able to do to that scheme. So off the bat, that number of Penn State being the underdog feels incorrect to me. And I'm fascinated to see where you're coming from for this, and where everyone else is, because I've kind of had my eyes opened in the last 24 hours of doing some research and some work trying to understand fully how this whole thing is going to play out.
Yeah, so if you look at the data models, whether it's SP Plus, whether it's Sportsline's model, whether it's Athletics, Austin Mox over at The Athletic, they're all calling this like a 1-point game, a pick'em game, a true toss-up game. And so if the line, again, injury news breaking before kickoff aside, if the line would move back to 2.5 or even to 3, I'd be very shocked, just because I think the going rate at this point is that Penn State and Notre Dame are about as evenly matched as you can get in a lot of different ways. And everyone thinks this is a toss-up. You either think this Penn State team is on a roll and that Notre Dame is dealing with too many injuries and cannot create enough offense with Riley Leonard at quarterback, or you think Penn State and head coach James Franklin are going to get to this point of the season and then lose and prolong the big game struggles narrative that has sort of defined a large portion of James Franklin's tenure to date. So all that being said, it has nothing to do with what's going to happen on the field. But that'll happen, yeah. So, yes, it will. So I think that's why I would be surprised, again, barring injury or other actual on-field news. I'd be surprised if the line moves. But I do think that when Vegas had to set this line, they had to make somebody a favorite. I guess they could have made it a pick'em, but they essentially did. I think they give Notre Dame's defense an edge, obviously, a little bit of an edge. I think that they shaded it some for a concern that Abdul Carter would not play, and I think they shaded it some thinking some in the betting public would be racing to bet the Fighting Irish because of James Franklin's quote-unquote big game track record. And sometimes when they set these numbers, it's all about the power rankings, and sometimes it's about how you, I don't want to say you as in you, T. Frank, or you, the listeners here, but the general casual bettor might look at a game and say, James Franklin can't win that game. And so they bet Notre Dame, and they don't want to give those kind of people too many points to play with. So, yeah, I wasn't shocked when the look-ahead line came out.
Right.
Hypothetical, and it said Penn State would be an underdog. It didn't surprise me then. Doesn't surprise me it hasn't flipped favoritism in this contest now. But I do think that, again, when it's 1.5 as it is, certainly everyone involved, odds makers, people analyzing this game, etc., for the most part, think this is going to be a toss-up. So I'm okay with where the point spread is.
It's you mentioned that it's kind of a pick'em game. I think from a talent perspective, that's absolutely correct. You look at these two teams, and the way I thought about it, and the way I kind of do think about it, is that Notre Dame could play its game and could just play the way it plays, and they could win. And Penn State could play an uneven brand of football on offense. They could give up some drives and some field goals on defense and find a way to win. Neither of these teams have to be perfect when it comes to the way they play to have a path to a win. And then, so to me, it comes down to, what are you doing to gain the edge? What are you doing to have an advantage? And I understand the injuries are part of that, because, if Love can play and he's actually healthy, and surprise, his knee is magically healed, or if Abdul Carter suddenly there's no problem with him taking contact on that upper body, I think it was his left upper body, then that does change some of these perceptions.
Right.
But largely, when you look at some of these things when it comes to schematically, I think somebody asked, Jack asked, what did Notre Dame's offense do against Georgia? And of course, the answer was nothing from Empress here. And so there's some truth to that. One of the things that I've been looking into today, and I'm going to write about this later at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, they're banged up on the interior of their offensive line. Right guard is injured. Center struggles generally with football players on the other side of the line of scrimmage. But what they want to do is they want to be a downhill team. They want to play inside zone. They want to play gap schemes. They want to attack forward. They want to come downhill at you. And they couldn't do that against Georgia. And that was a shocking pivot to watch this team, who historically has been that kind of, control the game with the offensive line, have to play option football and run outside. Quarterback sweeps, generally running to the edge, reverses, jet sweeps, things like that, because they couldn't get any movement on the interior. So when you look at Penn State's defense, what is their strength? It's against that exact same formula. So I'm struggling from a match standpoint on that side of the ball, just digging into Penn State's defense. I don't think anything changes in this game against Penn State that they didn't see last week against Georgia. And then it comes down to the turnover conversation and some other things we can get into in a second. But like from where I started, I think Notre Dame has to do more outside of who they are to find a path to success based on the matchup and the problems they have on the interior of their offensive line. So when you're talking about like their ability to run the football, that was not a part of the game outside of Riley Leonard making plays outside of structure in a big way last week, in the traditional run game.
Yeah, and he will certainly do that. I think that, as we saw last week, but at other points throughout the season, and also during his time at Duke, Riley Leonard has absolutely no problem with leaving the pocket. Another reason why, if Abdul Carter can't play, you lose his ability to play a bit of a spy and track somebody like Riley Leonard down as a runner at the quarterback position if need be. So time will tell on that front. T. Frank, when you look at the Penn State offense against, and I am having some back and forth buffering issues here, so I'm sorry if this is going back on what you just talked about. I don't think it is, though, but are you convinced Penn State can run the ball the way it has wanted to against this Notre Dame defense?
Yes. So that's an interesting conversation, leads back to what I wrote about. And by the way, if you close are all your browser tabs closed?
They are. And we're just chugging along here in the wrong direction. Yes.
All right. Well, just yell at everybody in the next room to get off the Wi-Fi because you need it. Yes. Penn State's run game, Andy Kotelnicki's scheme, it takes advantage of the placement and the angles of defenders by manipulating them out of where they want to be to where he wants them to be. So this is the broad picture. Last year, Penn State saw man coverage, 8 men in the box, more than any other scheme, far and away. And it caused problems in the passing game. It caused problems in the run game because now you've got a safety 2 yards from the line of scrimmage instead of 8 yards from the line of scrimmage. So they were effectively put into a box and then beaten in the box by the defense. But with Andy Kotelnicki and the way he can unload one side of the field with unbalanced formations and motions, or put compromised defenders, corners, safeties, into key positions in the run fit, teams have stopped playing cover one against this team. It went from number 1 to 3rd of the primary coverages that you see against this team. The other two are zone coverages, because when you play zone, you're not dependent on where the offense lines up to dictate where you line up. So there's some more flexibility and malleability in how you can defend the run. And Andy Kotelnicki still generated some explosive plays off those, but they have been elite at generating explosive plays against this particular style of defense, against man coverage, especially aggressive man coverage that gets close to the receivers, and they need to be within the proximity to be successful. So does Notre Dame play that? And if they do they win the line of scrimmage? Because if you allow this team, Penn State, and specifically Katron Allen, to get into the open field and have a one-on-one. He's the one guy that consistently makes those corners and linebackers and safeties pay for being out in space. And Andy Kotelnicki can scheme it. We've seen that happen. And Katron Allen and Nick Singleton can rip off explosive runs. So it's on the linebackers and the primary run defenders, the primary run fit, to win and get in the backfield. And that just hasn't happened as much with Penn State's run game since Nolan Rucci came into the game and they have 5 healthy linemen again. So again, when we talk about the other run game, and these two teams are built similarly, Penn State's advantage remains. And I feel like schematically what they want from you, Notre Dame is apt to give that. And if they don't, they're pivoting to something they're not comfortable with. And I think that's a huge advantage for Penn State.
What do you think about this question, T. Frank? This comes from Noah on the YouTube channel. A little bit of a different topic, but does Notre Dame put its All-American safety Xavier Watts on Tyler Warren in man coverage, similar to how Ohio State did with Caleb Downs when the Nittany Lions and Buckeyes met earlier this year? I know that's been a popular talking point for a lot of people in the fan base this week, and especially I think on the Notre Dame side as they look at the obvious challenge the Fighting Irish have in trying to stop Tyler Warren. What is your take on that?
Yeah, I apologize. I'm trying to pull up their coverage situation, their coverage numbers. They play field and boundary, which means it's either deep or free, depending on the alignment and the matchup. And that is, again, that's an advantage for Penn State when it comes to those players getting the matchups you want, because then it's determined, is he the number 2 or the number 3 in that side of the formation. I think that's a pivot. And this is, again, the question is, do they? They can, but then they're making schematic changes that aren't necessarily on film, at least that I've seen. So I was trying to pull up how many snaps Xavier Watts had in the slot. And that's going to be, that's a big thing. So he has about 150 snaps in the slot. So yes, he can play man coverage. He can be that guy. From what I've seen, I think they prefer he's the primary deep safety. Because of the strengths and weaknesses of the other players that play, but he absolutely can play in the slot, and that would be a decision they have to make, kind of like when Kalen King played against Marvin Harrison Jr. and shadowed him. That is something Penn State had not done, and suddenly they decided to do. So number 8, Aiden Schuler, I think is the other guy that is will be the primary defender on Tyler Warren, and he has a lot fewer snaps in the slot. So it would make sense they would have Watts on Tyler Warren in this game and in this situation if they can make that happen. And I don't think they're stupid, so I think they'll probably try that. Yeah.
Yeah, good chance that Al Golden, the Penn State letterman, who is the Fighting Irish defensive coordinator, has spent plenty of time since the Sugar Bowl victory trying to figure out with his staff how to slow down Tyler Warren, which obviously few have done so far this season. T. Frank, any other final thoughts until we can flip sides of the ball here, or have we covered everything you wanted to cover?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge for Penn State is going to be the defensive line, because it is genuinely a great defensive line. I'm trying to pull up R.J. Oben, the defensive end. I think he's excellent against the run. He's physical. He's long. He's athletic enough for his size that he's going to cause some problems. And then the other guy that flashed early in the game against Georgia, Gabriel, what's his name? Sorry, I'm trying to do this where I usually just throw out the numbers. 97. Gabriel Rubio. He's the guy that I think from a size perspective, activity length, he's coming on as a player. He's going to have a big game, because that's a guy who I think from a size perspective can challenge somebody like Nick Dawkins. And that interior matchup and those physical edge defenders, I know that everyone's going to talk about in the pass rush, Tuyamaka. I just kind of blew right through the middle of his name. I don't know if that's how you say it. He's a good run defender, but he's not the same level as some of these other guys in terms of the physicality and the violence he plays with in the run. And that's going to determine a lot of the success and failure of Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. And that's going to determine, whether or not Penn State's in 3rd and long. And suddenly that flips where that man coverage, that aggressive man coverage, is an advantage for Notre Dame. So it's not going to completely eliminate it, but it will selectively be it could be an advantage for Notre Dame that they play who they are. It's just on those early rundowns, does that happen? And so those are the guys I'm looking at to control this particular game. In the coverage, I still don't know if their linebackers are good in coverage. I haven't seen many teams really take advantage of them. But if you're going to try and do that, you're going to do that with Tyler Warren, and especially I think in this game, Nick Singleton can be big as a receiver out of the backfield, because they are more than willing in those situations to leave Kaiser one-on-one with running backs. And Nick Singleton, an elite athlete in space, I would like to see that particular matchup if I'm Penn State.
Notre Dame's defensive line, the big storyline to me here, it's just been beat up throughout this season. Just had guys go out sort of left and right. And then Riley Mills, the most recent one, injured defensive tackle, second team All-American. He was hurt in the opening round of the college football playoff. Obviously, Notre Dame good enough to get by Georgia without him. But Howard Cross, another standout defender along that line for Al Golden & Co., left the game against Georgia, came back in. He seems like he's going to be all good and able to play his normal amount of reps. Time will tell on that. But the question to me here, beyond the X's and O's part of it, is just how can Notre Dame make 2 more games? It suffered a number of injuries on the defensive side of the ball. And can it make it through 2 more games getting the kind of play it has out of some of the backups or guys who were put in, like, they were kind of co-starters, but now the guy. Can it make it 2 more games? And so that's sort of the big question to me. You highlight some of it's a very good defense. I think some in the Penn State fan base have got the perception, think that this defense is not maybe as good as a lot of other. I just don't know where that comes from. I think it's a fantastic defense. It will give Penn State problems. You will see times when Drew Aller gets frustrated and some other guys get frustrated, and it just kind of will be what it is. Can Penn State solve the puzzle enough to win? And can Notre Dame continue to overcome all those injuries, deal with Tyler Warren, deal with what has been a very good Penn State attack in a lot of different ways throughout this postseason run, albeit against SMU and Boise State? Can Penn State keep moving? So fascinating matchup there for sure, the Penn State offense against the Notre Dame defense.
Of course, Penn State fans are doing to Notre Dame what has been done to them the whole season. If they haven't played anybody, you look at their ACC schedule, and it is difficult to find some comparable teams to Penn State, but Notre Dame is the team that's comparable to Penn State on the Notre Dame schedule. So you have to I do think there is it reminds me a little bit of the SMU game, to a different degree, to a more extensive degree. Notre Dame's defense may be injured, as you point out, and also the perception of it might be a little bit inflated, but not much. This is a good defense. They are well schooled. When it comes to zone coverages, that's going to be a problem. They do not make mistakes. They're an aggressive defense. I didn't see a ton of biting on play action fakes. I feel like they're really well disciplined. They tackle well. I don't see a ton of guys. I haven't really gone into it deeply of how many missed tackles they've had, but generally their top 2 guys are, they only have 2 guys with more than 10 missed tackles. Penn State I think has 5 or 6. So this is a well-disciplined team that does, as Rob, where was this? Ken says, man coverage will lead to blown coverage. If there's one thing I saw in the Georgia game specifically, it was that there were some blown coverages and there were some lapses where suddenly Georgia had players open downfield and Georgia didn't make those plays. So they pivoted to more zone coverage in the second half, and that worked as well. I do think if the answers are there for Notre Dame, I just don't know which ones they're going to take on defense to make it hard on Penn State, or if they're going to be who they are, which is 50% cover 1, play with an extra man in the box, take away the run with numbers and with aggression up front, and then play sticky man coverage outside, which, by the way, is exactly what Penn State likes to do on defense as well. Generally, that's their plan too.
Right. So it should be fascinating to see. Well, speaking of that Penn State defense, let's flip the side of the field here and look at the Penn State defense against the Notre Dame offense. As we noted, you can't really have this conversation without noting that you don't know how much Abdul Carter will play and how effective he will be when he plays, and the same goes for starting Notre Dame tailback Jeremiah Love. So with that caveat out of the way, T. Frank, Riley Leonard leads this Notre Dame offense. Duke transfer, who is a starting quarterback for the Fighting Irish, capable of obviously throwing, running, doing both. This team is not, at least from what I've been able to gather, one that is going to endlessly test you with throws down the field. So I think that's of note. I'm sure you're going to talk about that here in a second. But what have you learned so far about this Notre Dame offense? We've all, obviously, I think most people watching this are fairly familiar with the Penn State defense. Hopefully we have some ND folks here with us, and we appreciate you joining us. But from the Notre Dame offense, what have you learned so far?
It's a little disjointed because, what they did to Indiana is who they are. And then does Indiana have the same defensive personnel as Penn State? Can you expect those things from the Nittany Lions, who haven't given up big runs and explosive plays? And then I think it's kind of just the same game plan you've seen from Penn State, teams that face Penn State all year. Short passing game, quick game, option routes underneath, trying to find voids in zone coverage. And then on third down, you play, they play man coverage, you throw slants. That seems to be the plan. So it's going to be, to me, does Riley Leonard make enough plays out of structure to hurt Penn State and keep Notre Dame in the game? Because that's what he did against Georgia, because the run game wasn't working. The quick passing game against Georgia's zone coverage team was working fairly well and keeping the drives going, but it was the turnovers and the explosive plays from the quarterback out of structure that really generated some of those points early that led to Georgia having to throw the ball. And by the way, Georgia played the same way. They played scared of Notre Dame's defensive line. They were not trying to run downhill on that team. They were trying everything they could to run outside, to play. It felt like Georgia was an FCS team coming up and getting the check against an FBS team. And I found that wild to watch Georgia play like that. And so I don't think Penn State's going to play like that. And I don't think that Notre Dame, unless something bad happens, is going to get an early lead. So then it becomes about containing the run game and mitigating the drives. They're going to get plays. They're going to make drives. It does become corralling Riley Leonard. And it's the easy thing to say about the quarterback. But, I mean, I think that's where it kind of starts and ends with this offense, because their receiver, number 6, is good. He's been the guy that has been kind of the go-to here in the playoffs, but they don't necessarily have a bona fide number 1. Jordan Faison has been good. I don't see a guy necessarily that stands out above the rest. And they make some good deep plays in the passing game. They can make plays there, but it is not like it's not a guaranteed thing. So that's an area where I'm still working on, the deep passing game, the back shoulder game. Those are all things that are sneaky good for this team that I need to watch a little bit more to understand, like, the depth of that particular matchup.
Yeah, one very interesting portion of this game, and we probably should have talked about it in the Notre Dame defensive portion of this conversation, but it slipped my mind for whatever reason until now. But turnovers are a big, big, big part of what Notre Dame does, especially on defense. But it also is very good at not creating turnovers on offense. But both of these teams are very good when it comes to not creating turnovers and then trying to get as many takeaways as possible. Nobody is a better mark in the country than Notre Dame, with 31 takeaways so far this season. But when it comes to Notre Dame's offense, T. Frank, why do they protect the ball so well?
Because Riley Leonard makes good decisions, and he doesn't put the ball in harm's way a whole lot, and they're careful with it. I mean, it's kind of it's Drew Aller with wheels, minus kind of the high end quarterback potential, but Aller has a little more special in him from the passing game. So here's the thing. I try to have like a theme to the thumbnails of these videos, and this is the point. Which quarterback makes plays with the other's strengths? Does Riley Leonard throw some deep passes and shake up Penn State's plan? And does Drew Aller, as people have put in the chat, does he run against man coverage? Can he extend plays and make sure third down doesn't turn into a punt? Which one uses the other's strength better and who makes more plays overall? These two teams are so even, so it ends up being, kind of basic, comes down to quarterback versus quarterback, because even now I don't really have a great feel of like which one has a decisive advantage to do that. Aller could rip off some massive throws and the game could be over. I don't know. If they start fast, Notre Dame's in trouble. if Penn State starts too fast and they put the ball on the turf, they go 3 and out quickly, they start a little too hot, because sometimes I don't think the issue is that they're skittish. They are bloodthirsty. Aller wants to win badly. And so sometimes, like in that Boise State game, they were going up tempo to score some big plays by getting base calls and then throwing or running for big plays. And I felt like the offensive line at times wasn't ready to block. And I felt sometimes the play generally, everyone knew the play, everyone's on the same page, but they weren't ready to play football on that next snap. So poise and precision are absolutely crucial in this game. And I know that sounds like coaching, but generally there's a reason coaches go back to those cliches. That's what it's going to come down to.
It should be a great game. It's why, again, so many people see it as pretty much a true toss-up until at least the injury stuff gets sorted out. T. Frank, anything else stand out to you about this Notre Dame offense as we head into the game, and also what Penn State's defense can do to stop it?
They're physical, and they again, really well-coached team. Even though I think the offensive line, which should be a strength, is not a strength for this team at the moment. So there are ways to beat all of these offensive linemen left to right. I think everyone at this point is aware the left tackle is a freshman. I think even against Amin Vanover, that is an advantage for Penn State. How Abdul Carter plays in this game, I would want him playing off the ball anyway, because the center struggles with athleticism and speed and explosiveness over over the nose. And I think that the right guard center combination is a struggle because the right guard is injured. And again, Landon did a great job breaking that down on his YouTube channel, pointing out all the little details. It's pretty obvious on film that the dude does not have power and cannot move guys off the ball at this point. He still throws his body into everybody. But Zane Durant on the interior, once again, is going to be a huge advantage for Penn State. And it's going to be the athleticism and aggression of that particular lineup. I would expect a lot of defensive stunts from the tackles and trying to get linebackers free into the backfield. I think all those things are possible. And so the last thing I would, the running game, I think everyone makes a big deal about Jeremiah Love, but 24 is also really good too. Jadarian Price, he's a good football player. So contain.
Yes, he is.
Yeah, contain, breakout plays. Everything's bottled up in the middle. Don't let them bounce outside, whether that's the quarterback run or the offensive backfield. Don't let any jet sweeps outside. If you contain all of those things, I think that's an advantage for Penn State, which means you now have Tony Rojas, and I would expect maybe Abdul Carter playing in orbital positions. That feels like a real tough matchup for Notre Dame. Other than if they can target those guys in coverage. Like if you can find Abdul Carter in coverage, if he's playing more linebacker, that is an advantage for Notre Dame.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And obviously short fields like we saw in the Georgia game, and also big special teams plays can just throw all this stuff out the window before anybody even knows it is happening. Notre Dame, of course, had a kickoff return for a touchdown in the Sugar Bowl. Its special teams have not done a ton, much like Penn State, just not a whole lot going on really in the return game for them for much of the season. Their kicker, Mitch Jeter, was very up and down during the regular season, but he has been perfect so far in the playoffs. Still, that storyline, I think, is going to continue to be something Notre Dame fans are probably a little bit nervous about coming into this game, despite the fact that he has bounced back tremendously from a tough end to the regular season. T. Frank, is it prediction time? You have any final thoughts before we get into our predictions?
Let me see. I guess I want to learn a little more about the tight ends because I saw them play physical. I also saw them get jacked up a couple times by Georgia. Again, Georgia, there were things in that game I was surprised by. We do helmet scouting. And I get to, I'm watching the Notre Dame film, and I'm getting distracted by watching Georgia make mistakes in the secondary. I just, you don't expect that from that helmet, that logo, to play kind of college football. You think that's a pseudo NFL team. And then you have to do the work of going in and looking at them and go, oh, this is a college team. 17, the one of their safeties is not necessarily the most athletic guy in the world, and they make some mistakes. So some of those big plays, I don't necessarily expect those against Penn State. Now, Penn State does make mistakes. This is the other thing. Penn State does make mistakes in communication with their secondary. So corners, if you get into bunch formations, I think we see a lot of the same things we've seen all year as teams try to attack the same problems for Penn State. And to me, it comes down to, what are the things we don't know? What have the coaches planned that are not on film? This is the time of year where fans say, like, what's in the playbook we haven't seen? There will be some things, like, it's time to pull out all the stops. If there's something you've been working on you haven't used yet, this is the moment to get into the championship game. And so what are the adjustments from both sides? And that's something, where Abdul Carter plays even without the injury, I think that's a big thing. The adaptation of the defense, what do we see? Do we see more zone coverage from Notre Dame? Do we see the same thing we've always seen? The blitz packages are going to be there. It's something we haven't talked about that from Notre Dame. Penn State has struggled with those blitz packages. So having a better plan from Penn State, I think, is a big part of that as well. So, I mean, there's 1,000 different things. We can't get to all of them here today, even though I desperately tried, Greg.
Right. Yeah, I appreciate the effort, T. Frank. A tremendous game coming up in the college football playoff semifinal, the first of two, with the other one, Texas, Ohio State, taking place on Friday in Dallas. We are not going to make predictions for that game, but we are going to make them for Penn State and Notre Dame. Again, the point spread, 1.5 points in favor of the Fighting Irish. The total's 44-45, depending on where you look. T. Frank, our staff made their picks over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com earlier this week. We got one already in the chat, PSU 24. Notre Dame 17 from Dave. I would expect, it was funny. I did about 10-12 minutes with Mike Singer of our sister site, Blue and Gold, that covers Notre Dame. And we got to the point of the show where he was talking about making predictions. And he said, I'm going to just kind of guess that the way this is going to go this week is anyone who covers Penn State is going to pick Penn State. Anyone who covers Notre Dame is going to pick Notre Dame because a close game is expected. Yeah. And that's just usually what we do. And I said, Mike, I think you're 100% right. And so let me show you the predictions from not T. Frank and I, and then he and I can explain why we made the picks we did. So Ryan Snyder covers recruiting at Blue White Illustrated, has it Penn State 24, Notre Dame 20. Sean Fitz, our publisher at Blue White Illustrated, has it in Penn State 26, Notre Dame 23. And then Nate Bauer, our insider at Blue White Illustrated, has it Penn State 26, Notre Dame 20. So as you see there, we all picked Penn State, and what goes without saying that I think we all expect a close game. But T. Frank, let's get to your prediction now. You have it Penn State 31, Notre Dame 20. Notable because it's the largest point spread of any of us who made a pick on this game. Why?
Yeah, everything I said about, I think, by the way, this was different than my prediction in the article, and you can go read everybody's opinions and their thoughts of what's behind those numbers. You can go read it at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Just like I said, everything I outlined today, I think Penn State's schematic advantages in this game that they have built into their offense cause Notre Dame some problems where they will have to adjust. I don't think the same is true of the reverse. Penn State has, and this is something before I even got to all the run game stuff, Penn State has been better against man coverage because of Tyler Warren and the improvement from Trey Wallace. So they have at least two answers in the offense. I don't know that Amari Evans, people have been asking for the Amari Evans breakout game. They don't play quarters, right? So like the thing I've talked about all year long is the way that a lot of teams have dealt with Kotelnicki's shifts in motions and mania of where people line up and all the advantages he uses. One of the ways to do that is to have quarters and just like throw a safety at wherever the run is going based on the alignment. They don't do that. This is not a too high defense. So cover 3 is what they're going to run. And that's a little more predictable, a little more stable. And I think it has caused Penn State probably the most problems, but they've still been successful at at having offense against that. And back to the Amari Evans thing, he's kind of a specialist against in one or two situations. So boil it down, Penn State can make plays in the passing game. I expect a couple of big runs. And so a fast start, points, that does not favor Notre Dame. And I think Penn State can break through because of all the things that I could be completely wrong, right? So their defensive line could manhandle Penn State's offensive line. And that's the only way I think that Notre Dame blows out Penn State is if the offense just has nothing. And they're always in 3rd and long, and they're always under pressure. But I think we've seen enough from the Penn State offense that that's not going to happen. The offensive line is good enough to fight back in these situations and spring the running backs for a couple of big games. So that's where I have it. I think another fast start, or at least at some point they're going to generate some big plays. And that's going to lead to Notre Dame having to keep up. And I don't know that they can do that in this offense outside of Riley Leonard creating out of structure. And again, the data says that Penn State's pretty good at preventing those, especially on the ground with the quarterback.
Yeah, so I completely I look at this game like this. I hate it making a pick on it because I don't know the status of two of the best players on either side of the ball. But I do think it's a very close game. I have a Penn State 24, Notre Dame 20. I went back and forth on. I had the score locked in for a while, but I was going back and forth on who wins. Notre Dame can take the ball over, and then they take advantage of it. And there is just no way of denying that that has been a successful formula for them this season. So can Penn State limit its turnovers? I think that's question number one. Question number two, can Andy Kotelnicki's offense stay on schedule against this very talented Notre Dame defense? I think that some of the issues, as you've documented, and I think you and Landon have also documented for quite some time this year, is that like any other football team, when Penn State's offense struggles, it's because it gets very little on first and second down, finds itself impossibly behind the sticks repeatedly, has its defense tired because it cannot move the ball, cannot run clock, cannot stay on the field. And that leads to problems and situations where some of the things you're talking about as a strength for Penn State and maybe a weakness for Notre Dame can actually flip based on how much the defense is on the field. So that would be concern number two. And then obviously, look, concern number three is pretty obvious, that can Penn State's offensive line continue to play the way it has? Will it have issues with blitz pickups and so on and so forth that it did against Boise State? We saw Boise State have some really good concepts and plans to take advantage of the Penn State pass rush. Will that be an issue again for the Nittany Lions against the Al Golden defense that will blitz on all different ways, shapes, and sizes? So time will tell. So all the answer to those three questions are going to be the ones that lead to the final outcome. I have a Penn State 24-20, but Notre Dame winning this game would not surprise me in the least. And it should be a good one. Hopefully it lives up to the hype. I get concerned, T. Frank, because a lot of times these games we hype up as ones that are going to be good and close and this and that aren't. So hopefully this one lives up to the hype. But either way, we'll break it down here at BlueWhaleIllustrated.com.
I think there's a better chance it turns into a rock fight than a shootout, because both of these teams want to drag the other team into the mud. Like, that's where we're going to see, pseudo Big Ten football. Because Notre Dame is a Big Ten team that plays the ACC. Come on. That's what we're saying here, that Notre Dame should have been in the Big Ten for the last 50 years, just of geography and their style of play and everything else that goes into all of these things. So these are two teams built, as James Franklin said all the way at the very beginning, they're built the exact same way from the top down. And I think schematically, all that shows up on the field, they want to do the same things. So yeah, it could turn into an absolute bloodbath of punts. I don't think it turns into 56-45 and everyone's like, this game was amazing, and like everyone's doing shots at the end of the game. But I do think that good means close, and I think that we've outlined that this is a pretty close game. The last thing that I'll say, and this goes back to kind of making sure this is all fair, Penn State's D-line is also banged up. So 3 defensive tackles on the field. 3 defensive ends, then you're into the freshmen. That's a problem for Penn State. If they're on the field a lot, I can see that being a problem. But from a physical banging perspective of repetitive violence, I just don't see the power from the Notre Dame because of the injuries and the youth and some of the experience. They got some horses, 59, the right tackle. He can dent some people. But overall, I think that Penn State can withstand that. And I think I would be a little bit disappointed in that group of what we've seen from them if they got worn down in this game from that perspective of constantly being hit and getting, tired in the fourth quarter. There's going to be a fatigue factor no matter what, but to give, like what I'm saying is like to just give up because they don't have anything left in the tank. I don't see that happening because I don't know that Notre Dame with their injury situation can force that to happen.
Penn State, Notre Dame, college football playoff semifinal, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time on Thursday. Landon and T. Frank will be live with the Tailgate Show. Give me that time one more time, T. Frank. 4:30.
4:30.
Right?
4:30. Yep, 3 hours before kickoff. Now, we don't go for the exact kickoff because, that's probably like 7:45 or something like that. But yeah, 7:30 is the airtime, right? Because then you're like, oh man, this game's going to be over at like 10:45. And no, it'll be over at 11. And you'll watch the post-game show till midnight, and then we'll all go to bed and be tired on Friday.
Yes, and then be sure to tune in to the BWI post-game show with T. Frank. That's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickel. Enjoy the college football playoff semifinal, Penn State fans. And if you're a Notre Dame fan, check us out. We have more Penn State Notre Dame coverage at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com and here on the YouTube channel. It's $1 for 7 days of access to BWI. We will catch you next time on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.